Your moments of the year, Dan. You got to see Kylian Mbappé live and in person against Argentina at the World Cup.
Yeah, moments of the year. Yeah, because I sort of leaned towards ones I was lucky enough to be there for.
Oh, that's fair enough, yeah.
And the World Cup was a great experience. And it wasn't any one moment in the France-Argentina game in Kazan. It was just an amazing game to be at. But it was just this sense that you're watching a player go from a level to the next level in terms of his reputation. Now, funnily enough, I mean, since the World Cup, I mean, he's still playing with PSG, and there's that sense he's not quite in your radar all the time, you know. But just there was a couple of moments in the early stage of that game where he won the penalty with a sort of amazing burst of speed and power, and you're thinking, yeah, like, you know, you're looking at his age and you're thinking this is sort of mildly terrifying, sort of how good he was at that stage. And okay, the legacy of that and even that performance in that game is enhanced by the fact that they went on to win the tournament.
Yeah.
But when I think of the France World Cup win, I find myself thinking less of the final and more of that match.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And even like the semi-final against Belgium was actually maybe the highest standard game in some ways of the lot. But that Argentina game was thrilling. But just watching him sort of come to the fore, and that was a moment.
Yeah, Luka Modric wins the Golden Ball. In retrospect, will we come to think, ooh, maybe Kylian Mbappé should actually have got it, considering...
He got Young Player of the Year. It was a nice little cop-out.
It was all sorted, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know...
I see the point. I see the point. I think probably the Croatian achievement was such... Maybe sometimes I find myself maybe leaning towards that semi-underdog story. And like Modric was making this team tick that had its limitations, but actually played its way through the tournament in a way that it almost improved as it went along. When you consider they could have gone out to Denmark on penalties or whatever, you know, and that would have been the end of the story very quickly. As much as he'd been good against Argentina prior to that and stuff.
Yeah.
I think, you know, that Croatian team, the semi-final in England, which is another sort of suggestion I put onto the list, you know, that Croatian story overall, that Croatian team. I think Modric probably still, if I was voting, I would have gone for that, but I can definitely see a strong argument the other way.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe he goes down to become the greatest player of all time after Leo Messi. I don't know. And you were like, oh, that was our chance. I don't know.
Out of the teams that made the semi-finals in the World Cup, is there any one player who's shooting the lights out at the moment? Because you mentioned Mbappe there, who potentially hasn't done it to the level that we were really excited for the season for Mbappe because of the World Cup he had. Like Pogba, they refer to the World Cup quite a bit. Lukaku's been speaking about how he's had to change his body shape post the World Cup.
De Bruyne has been injured.
Harry Kane hasn't exactly hit last season's standards just yet.
Eden Hazard?
But Hazard is a very good exception. Hazard is probably the best of the last four.
Yeah.
What about Harry Maguire?
Not so much. Yeah, no, it is a valid point. And even like some of the Croatian lads obviously play for Inter and stuff like that. You know, they went out to the Champions League last week, and it is a valid argument.
Ireland under-17s next on your list?
Yeah, like, so it's they're not all happy moments, but it was sort of a surreal moment. The penalty shootout in Chesterfield in May, and again, like, you know, I was over at that game. It was the game against Holland, and it was sort of a piece, just a light piece almost, to see how the kids were getting on, rather than necessarily covering the tournament in a really strong way. It was, let's see how these boys are getting on, as more of a broader piece, and then it ends up being this surreal event that actually there was only like a couple of hundred people in the stadium, but then you have this sense that everyone at home, because it was televised live on RTE, to be fair, suddenly bought into this story and this injustice of Jimmy Corcoran. So, you know, naturally the penalty shootout evolves, you're getting into it, Ireland are on the way out, and then he makes this save at the last minute. I remember one of his coaches from Cherry Orchard, I think, went down the line. So with the press box, I was to the left of the stadium, and there was nearly no one in that section of the stand, apart from one of the coaches, who I think is the dad of one of the other players, screaming at Corcoran just to be big, and to, you know, he'd missed a couple of the previous penalties. And it was like this Hollywood moment where for the last penalty, he eventually steps up and makes the save. And I have to be honest, I was looking down making notes, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle. Didn't even know what was going on. And then you look up and you see like the red card being produced, and all of a sudden it just went from one extreme to the other. And I saw the picture up a second ago of like Martin O'Neill storming onto the pitch, and all of a sudden it's like this is this massive story here, and like this is suddenly hugely important. And it was hugely important. It was as much as the application of the letter of the law was such, I don't think that referee refed again in the competition, and it wasn't enforced at the World Cup. Actually, you mentioned Denmark, Croatia. You're watching the shootout then, and lads sailing off the line, almost at the penalty spot by the time the penalty's taken.
Yeah.
And clearly, this was like a test case game, whereas like let's strictly enforce the letter of the law, but that consistency wasn't applied. And I mean, the young lads were like in this horrendous situation, and there was those tears that you show afterwards of the lads on the pitch in tears. But also, this around like 20 minutes after the final whistle, they were also milling around on their phones. Suddenly, the other thing as well, because it is today's generation or whatever, that they took their phones out and suddenly realised that everyone at home had been watching this game on television. And there was this buzz as well, so there was this anger, but there was also a sense of pride as well that they'd involved themselves in a national story. So that was something to remember.
We've got Rojo against Nigeria.
Yeah, I actually wasn't at this game, but this was one of the sort of things I remember from Russia, because I think I was about to travel to go from like one train station to another, one city to another, and I was in one of these sort of dingy waiting rooms with but it was absolutely jam-packed full of people, full of South Americans. For all that we love the the best fans in the world line as an Irish thing, actually at the World Cup the South Americans are miles above everyone else, and they were I think Ireland would have travelled in volume if they qualified, but the South Americans really travelled to Russia in a way that European countries didn't. And I was just like, obviously Argentina probably bring more than anyone else. They were like seconds from dipping out of the competition, and they got that like last minute goal and this entire train station. And even like, I thought Argentina weren't the popular country in South America. They deemed to be a bit aloof or whatever, but there was Colombians and other characters high-fiving and getting really into it, and you're like, this is a World Cup. Like, that's actually what the World Cup is about. It's about everyone travelling around, being in the one place. That's what a major tournament is about. I know we have this 12 country one in 2020. You're going to miss that, and anyone who's been to a major tournament knows that it's almost the off days for your team where you're mingling with all these fans of other countries. That's as good as anything. But that was a good moment.
Does it change things that it really resulted in like ultimate elimination? I guess obviously they got out of the group stages, which obviously proves your point that it was worth something. But does the France thing sort of deflate it a little bit?
Well, I don't know, because they ended up being part of a great game. Against France when they were leaving.
The game was amazing as well.
They were leaving in absolute shame, if they went out. I mean, and the whole thing was still a mess, right? Because you hear afterwards all the behind the scenes stuff, and the players had turned against management and so on. But it was just that like Argentina had so many fans there, and it's like, oh no, they can't go out now, because if they go out, that's removing a whole. So all of a sudden, then they won that game, and then actually travelled on. I think I was going to Kazan at the time, and all of a sudden this Argentinian sort of invasion happens, and they sort of rocked in, and like that France-Argentina game, the 4-3, like probably 95% of the stadium were Argentina fans. So you want them to stay in the competition as long as possible.
The World Cups are weird in that as the tournament progresses, the whole experience becomes much smaller. And
it goes back to normal. Like Moscow in the last 10 days was back to itself to a point, because pretty much the South American teams all got knocked out. And like the same England, Colombia in Moscow, the stadium was like, again, 90%, 95% Colombian. And there was that sense of anticlimax when those teams started to drift away.
We have the order was Stephen Kenny's final, but also you've got Russia beating Spain down on your list as well. So we'll talk about that because we're in the middle of our World Cup here.
Well, Russia-Spain was a surreal experience, because the atmosphere in the stadium actually wasn't that good at all. Now, Russia obviously, for its own reasons, had shipped a lot of the hooligans out of town, and shipped maybe a lot of the more hardcore football fans who had a bit of a reputation.
Is that true?
They definitely.
It's mad, really, isn't it? They picked up a group of people and drove them out of town.
Or did they ship them out of town, or were they not? I mean, you did hear the shipping out of town. Maybe that's dramatic. They certainly weren't in the stadiums anyway. They weren't getting into the matches. And so the Russia-Spain game in the Luzhniki was very much, it was like the last night at the proms football attendance, Like there was Mexican waves inside 10, 15 minutes. I mean, Spain scored early, and there was this really real, it was a nice family atmosphere, I guess. But when you watch like the Russian team, say in the Champions League, that atmosphere wasn't really. It was a different kind. They were almost cheering at the wrong times and stuff like that. They definitely weren't like. There was a lot of people who weren't regular football watchers there. but yet sort of against all the odds, Russia survive, amazing sort of durability to stay in the game. They get through, and you can have a whole separate debate about that, but they amazingly get through. And okay, the atmosphere in the stadium was still, it was incredibly noisy when they win the shootout and the atmosphere goes, but it was more so in Moscow later that evening. And you can talk about, the World Cup is inextricably linked with Russia, right? And Russia, and where Russia is, and what Russia's like on a day-to-day basis versus what Russia's like during this sort of 5-6 week tourist event, to showcase the best of Russia. But there was actually these like spontaneous scenes of celebration and sort of traffic and like
Italian 90.
Yeah, sort of people just jumping out of cars and getting caught in a traffic jam, getting back in, and that sort of semi-Italian 90 vibe, which I don't think is a common event in terms of this outpouring on the streets of actually like positive emotions. So that was a sort of a night, in a game that you do remember being at pretty clearly because of the mood. And I mean, I really enjoyed Russia while knowing what Russia is as well. And you read about Russia subsequently, and you know that really it hasn't changed dramatically in any way. But at the same time, you did actually meet like plenty of great locals there who were just living a very normal day-to-day life, who really enjoyed this experience. And for them, like, the World Cup meant something.
They didn't ship out the bad people and ship in actors or anything?
No, there was no actors shipped in, no. Like, I mean, and actually, like, across the tournament, you have some great conversations with just sort of very regular people who have been just chatting away very casually about politics and how the West sees us and all this. But then, you come away from it and you get really positive about it. And then you think, actually, well, it's still, sort of deeply flawed place in many ways. But that was a day that genuinely did sort of captivate people, and you could sense the mood of the country almost being lifted for 24 hours anyway.
Stephen Kenny's finals is after the FA Cup final?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's almost sometimes these moments grow significance in hindsight.
Yeah.
But, Stephen Kenny storming onto the pitch after Dundalk won and beat Cork in the FA Cup final, which was the sort of first couple of days in November. And this is tied in with the fact that 22 days later he was back there to be unveiled as effectively, as we know, Ireland's next manager. That's really what his unveiling is about. That's the only reason he left. And like Kenny, I mean, I do firmly believe that, like, and I really support like Kenny's appointment, and I think he would have been fine to have a crack at it now. But I think if they hadn't won that game, I don't think he would have got the job now.
Right. Even
I think,
after all the stuff.
I don't think so. No, I think it was timing as everything. And I've sort of touched on this in a sort of an end of year piece. Like, Dundalk lose that game. Like, I remember even the following day after Dundalk win the double, I remember Eamon Sweeney did a piece in our paper about now is the time for Kenny, and it sort of was juxtaposed against like this negativity and this drabness around the Irish team, and this, how it was perceived as very stale. And then you have like Stephen Kenny on one hand, this bright young thing, even though he's been managing for 20 years, his team who play good football, sense of, I mean, look at the joy that they're bringing, to their level. Why not give this man a chance? And I think if their year had ended differently, if they'd lost that final in a flat sense, he wouldn't have been marching out on the pitch. He wouldn't have been on the back pages the following day. He wouldn't have been there at the right time, at just the right place at the right time for this movement. And there's no doubt that what's happened, like the FAI have been influenced by public opinion. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that that's been a factor in the decision-making process. They might have got to the right decision in the end by bowing to that, but I really do believe that they were reacting to the sort of the mood music that was there. And I think if Dundalk don't win that game, I'm not sure if that sets off the same chain of events that leads him to getting that job.
Because they were expected to win the game because they're a better team.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's a better manager, and it's like
they were favourites to win the game. And I mean, and maybe people would disagree with that point, but I just think that it was the first couple of weeks in November. The O'Neill thing was bombing. Things were going pretty badly. There was a shortage of like outstanding candidates out there beyond Mick, and Kenny just forced himself into the picture. And I just think momentum and timing. Like, if it was 12 months ago, the Dundalk lost the FAI Cup final, they had lost the league to Cork, I don't think he would have been regardless of what he'd done in the Europa League in 2016, I don't think he would have been in that discussion. Whereas it was just this, at this moment in time, it just fell perfectly for him. And Yeah, I'm not sure if he knew that was a viable thing when he won the cup, but because I think there was a personal significance in him and finally winning the cup after losing the previous two at the Aviva, but it just all fell the right way at the right time. So it's one of these moments that in hindsight now you're thinking that was a very significant thing.
Last one is Gareth Bale's Champions League final.
Yeah, well, I wasn't at that game, but I was trying to think of games that you weren't at that. Where were you when that was scored?
Yeah.
And these Champions League finals tend to correspond with meaningless Ireland friendly trips, I've found. So I can chart where I've been for Champions League finals through a litany of end of season tours and friendlies, i.e. Man United Chelsea penalty shootout in Portugal for Trapp's first training camp in the Algarve and so on, New York for a couple of years. I just can always trace them. And we were in France at that time because we were playing France in that friendly 2 or 3 days later.
What was the score?
And lost 2-0, I think.
Fekir scored.
Yeah, and Sidibe was brilliant in the game, and Mbappe played for a while and stuff. Actually, I remember a few of the Irish players saying he was the best player I'd ever played against. It was almost, a sign of what was to come.
Yeah.
But I just remember this bar, city centre bar in Paris, and the Champions League final, the power of this game. And I know Karius made his mistakes and stuff, but all I remember is just this wow factor when Bale just produces this moment, particularly when I saw a fella just coming out of the toilet just 30 seconds afterwards to a cheering pub. I'm pretty sure I know who it was as well, but I don't want to sort of slander him. And just coming out to this horror of realising he'd missed this amazing moment coming out. The absolute, anyone's nightmare watching a game in a bar where you have to go to the toilet. And then you hear these cheers like something truly amazing has happened, and they come out afterwards. But it wasn't for Bale, it was an amazing moment given his uncertain status in Madrid over a period of time.
And it's mad that they should have cashed in on the back of that and sold him.
Well, the fakeness on the back of it was my favourite part.
Oh, the Ronaldo.
The parade around the pitch and posing for a team photo, and that moment where you've been smiling too much and your cheeks start to get sore because your smile is fake. That you could just see the pain in Gareth Bale and Ronaldo's face, and then the quotes that came out afterwards about Gareth Bale saying he wasn't happy about not being picked from the start.
But I think Bale was genuinely smiling though. I think he was happy.
Yeah, well maybe.
He was like, look what I've just done. Yeah. By the way, Ronaldo, not so much.
It was the most underwhelmed I've ever seen a bunch of people after winning 3 very major trophies in a row.
Yeah, it wasn't in the script, but it was an amazing, it was a pretty amazing strike.
Yeah.